Hi, this is Jeff Carmen with Elite BSC. I hope you're doing well. Today I'm going to wrap up a little three-part series that I've done on healthy, sustainable growth and for a commercial janitorial services company. In this week's session, I'm going to talk about making initial contact to prospective customers and then nurturing them through the all the way through the sales process. This is the business growth process I think I've covered in both sessions. Last week we covered how to do prospect research, how to find prospects, and how to get that information into a sales database. Today, I'm going to talk about how to make that first initial connection to discover some information from prospects. And then once we found that information, nurturing them through the sales process. I want to mention too, most of what we talk about are outbound techniques of growing your janitorial business. There's certainly inbound techniques that are very helpful and very successful in making your business grow. At France Building Services, we leaned heavily on the outbound side. We did some things on the inbound side, but most of our efforts were in pushing our message out in front of prospective customers versus pulling the message pulling prospects using messaging um, from the inbound technique side. So that's what we're going to talk about in this side, that outbound techniques. In order to have a good outbound to use outbound techniques successfully, you need to have a plan. There's three ways, or there's three keys that are important in this. The first is that you're focused. So it goes back to what we talked about last week. It's important that when you're doing outbound activities that you're focusing on ideal prospects, those ideal customers that you've identified that you want to do business with, and push most of your effort toward them. So it needs to be focused, needs to be systematic. It's important to have a framework, and that's what I'll talk about in this video. And then third, it's important to be consistent with this. And so I know that's difficult in a janitorial services business because it requires a lot of effort to just run the thing. So much less have time set aside to work on growing your business. And so I just, as you think through this and as you're putting your plan together, or you're putting your business growth plan together, it's important to figure out how you're going to make time to do this. And if you don't have time, maybe that's bringing in either bringing in an outside company to help you, or bringing in an employee to come in and help you with this. So it's just important to have all three of those things: focus, systematic, and consistent. The goal here is to build trust with prospects, and we'll talk about how we do that. And then by building trust, you reduce the perceived risk that these people have when they're considering your company. It's a big step if you're a buyer of our services. It's a big step to bring a new vendor in, because you really don't know how we're going to perform. I mean, it's like they can do a test drive and see what we're going to do for a few days, and then hey, okay, now sign off on the contract. There's a certain amount of risk, and so through this process, through this framework, we're going to try to build trust so that it makes it easier for them to select our company. So let's talk about first this initial connection. There's two primary purposes. The first is to make a positive first impression of your company. So again, this points towards having a good plan and thinking through this before you ever pick up the phone or send an email to somebody. So we want to make a positive first impression of our company. And then secondly, we want to gather information to determine a prospective customer's purchase readiness, or what we call prospect status. So that's what we're trying to find. We're trying to find out where they are in their buyer's journey. So I would suggest that when you're putting your database together, creating a field that you call prospect status, so that you can, I guess for lack of a better word, categorize prospects in your CRM based on their purchase readiness. And so I'll go through these really quick. These are titles, or these are prospect statuses we used at France Building Services. The first is pre-qualified, and you can see right there, this is a pre-qualified prospect, is at the very top of the funnel, or if you want to turn it up on its side, it's the very front end of your pipeline. And this is a prospective customer or organization that appears to meet the ideal customer profile, but you just haven't completed the initial connection process. So it's kind of a holding tank for prospective customers that you haven't had the ability to reach yet. The next level down, or coming down the funnel, is what we refer to as marketing qualified prospect, or marketing qualified leads, MQLs, or we also refer to them as cold leads. And these are companies and organizations where you confirm in the telephone, in the initial connection telephone call, that they are certainly the type of customer that you want to do business with, but they show no interest at all in considering a change. And so we refer to those as MQLs. Now, an important point here is this, and I think a lot of people get tripped up on this. If there's a prospective customer that's the size of business or organization that you want to do business with, and you reach out to them and they say, I have no interest in changing janitorial vendors, I love the one that I'm with, that doesn't diminish the fact that they're still a very good prospect for you. They're just not moving in their buyer's journey, but the company or organization itself is still a very, very good prospect. We just need to put them in a different bucket, and that bucket is called MQL, or cold prospects. The next level down is what we call sales qualified leads, or SQLs, or warm leads. And these are people, these are organizations where you've contacted them, you confirm that they're a good sized customer or a good sized prospect, and they're not ready to do business right now, but they indicate a date in the future that they will be considering proposals. So what that looks like is someone who says, yeah, we just signed a contract, a 2-year contract that'll run through the end of 2027. And so that's when we'll look at this again. And so it's important to put that prospective customer in a separate bucket so that you can track that and make sure that you call them before that time comes up. So let's say that at the end of 2027, I would probably reach out to them in, say, September or October to make sure that we are on their RFP list. And then lastly, what we call an opportunity, or a hot prospect, if you will, is a company who is ready to start receiving proposals and do facility tours. These are people who are actively in the buying process. So again, these are prospect statuses that I would encourage you to put in your CRM so that you can track where all of your prospects are in your sales pipeline. Now, here's how you put the two together. Here's if you remember from the first video, the buyer's journey is on the left, and the journey starts with where a prospective customer is unaware that they have a problem, or they're really pleased and they don't have many problems. And so that goes all the way down to the journey goes all the way down to the decision. Well, that's what we're trying to do with this prospect status, is we're trying to say, hey, let's set up our database so that whenever we're making outbound telephone calls and emails, that we have a status that we can move people through the funnel. And it just makes sense, and it helps you with the things that you're going to do with content here in just a little bit. So one of the questions that comes up is when we're ready to make telephone calls, or we start making outbound telephone calls to prospective customers, a question we get a lot, or I get a lot, is, so how often should I call them? Should I call them twice a day? Should I call them every day? Should I call them once a month? What does that look like? And so here is a little cadence, initial connection cadence, that we've used at France Building Services, and it seems to work. We've tweaked this a little bit, and what this looks like is on that first day. So you've got your database, you've got all that in there, you're ready to pick up the phone and make telephone calls. On that first day, when we make outreach, so we're going to make a telephone call, and if we talk to the person and we get the information you want, then the initial connection phase ends, and then you can move on to nurturing. If you don't talk to them, and I can tell you from making a ton of dials, a ton of calls in this business, a lot of people don't answer their phone. And so what we would do is we would make a telephone call, we would leave a voicemail, and then we would follow it up with an email that says, I left you an email, or I left you a voicemail, and here's what I was trying to discover from you. So I've got a little email template email template that I use when I do that. And then 5 days later, or you can pick another day, you can go 7 days later, whatever the case might be. 5 days later, I'm going to make a telephone call. Again, if I reach them, the process ends. If I don't, I'm not going to leave a voicemail on that particular call, because I don't want to be the person who's leaving a bunch of emails. And then let's say 4 more days, which would be 9 days out, I'm going to do the same thing I did on the first day. And I'm going to do that, you can see, through about 25 days, or, about a month. So I'm going to call somebody for about a month. And if they never respond to an email, I never talk to them on the telephone, they don't call me back, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to end that process with them, but then I'm going to find another contact and I'm going to do that. And I will keep doing that until I find the information that I want to find. And so before you make a call, that understand that there's a process of the discovery call or this initial call process. And the first is pre-call. Pre-call is where you're going to pull up whatever you have in your database and see if you've called them before. Pull their website up, see what kind of business they are. It really just kind of helps you get your mind ready to make that call. The second phase here, the second part of the process is the actual call itself, where we're trying to gather information. And there's three pieces of information that we're trying to gather on this call. And the first is we're wanting to either confirm that we have the right decision maker or find out who's responsible for the decisions related to janitorial services. So that's the first piece. Second piece is we want to find out if they outsource this work or they use an in-house team to do the work. And then lastly, we want to find their current, the status of the relationship with their current vendor. And another way to say it is we want to find out what their purchase readiness is so that we can put them in one of those prospect statuses. And then there's post call. So what do we do after we hang the phone up is we want to create a task for the timing of the next action that they're gonna do with this particular prospect, or we might call another person at the company or organization. So, for instance, if you call somebody and they say, "No, I'm not the person who I don't have any part of the selecting the janitorial services company. That's this person." Then what you're going to do is you're going to make a note in your system. That's post call. Make a note in your system, create a new contact for this company, and then reach out to that person. So that's the part of the discovery call. Here's an example, and I've got three examples here. And the first one, and it goes like this, and you can see right there in the very first thing that I say when I call, I don't chit chat. I don't ask them about the weather. I don't say, hey, how about those Bears or how about the Cubs? Boy, yeah, none of that. People are busy, and I believe that they want to get right. People want to get right to the point. So it sounds like this. So it would be say, hey, hello, Cindy. Again, this assumes I already know that person's name, or this is a medical practice. So this I already know the medical practice manager's name, and I would say this, hey, hello, Cindy. This is Jeff Carmen with France Building Services. We provide housekeeping services to outpatient medical facilities. The purpose of my call is to gather some information from you. I'm trying to find the right person to speak with about how your practice handles cleaning. Would that be you or someone else? So real quick, I've done a couple of things. I've referred to what we do by what they call it. So I didn't say we're janitorial services. I call it housekeeping because that's what they call it in medical facilities. If you're calling a school, you want to say custodial services. And then I referred to what they are as practice. So I'm trying to find the right person to speak about how your practice, it's a medical practice, not a company. I'm using correct terminology. And so I'm just asking, is that you? And then if you've called before, you know that some people are pretty short with people who call and interrupt their day. And this is no exception in this example. This lady says, "Yeah, that's me." And so now we've confirmed the contact. Again, I go, great. Again, the purpose of my call is to gather some information. Specifically, do you outsource this work? And if so, how often do you gather proposals? You can ask that another way. You could also say, do you outsource the work? And if so, can you tell me a little bit about how pleased you are with your current vendor? That's probably a better one. We've worked on that phraseology a lot to try to get it right. Again, this is a typical response. We outsource the work, but in this case, one of the doctor's family members cleans the office, so we probably won't be changing ever. And so now what we know is we know where they are in their buyer's journey. They're not even started in their buyer's journey. They don't have a problem, or they're unaware they have a problem, or they're pleased. And so what I'm going to do in my CRM system is I'm going to change their prospect status from pre-qualified to MQL or cold. And then I say, hey, I understand. Would you mind if I sent you some information and then followed up? And then I ask a question and say, hey, I did a little bit of research about your company or your practice before I called. It looks like you have 15 providers in your practice. So what I'm trying to do with this question is two things. Is I'm wanting to show them that, hey, I did a little bit of research before I picked up the phone and called you. This is not some telemarketing farm where I'm just dialing numbers. I've done some research, and so I know that you've got 15 providers. And I'm also I want to confirm that I'm talking to a practice, in this particular case, large enough that we'd want to do business with. And she responds here, well, we have 14 because somebody retired. So that's just a little information. And she says, that's fine. But like I said, we're probably not going to change ever. So what I've done is I've confirmed that they're a large enough customer, and I've also received permission to reach out to them. Now I can tell you most people are going to give you permission. 99.9% of the people are going to say, yeah, that's okay. They'll probably delete your emails that you send, and they probably won't respond to any voicemails, but they're giving you permission to do that. And I say, hey, absolutely. I promise I'm not going to wear you out with calls and emails. I have your email as cindy@osmd.com. Again, this is important that you show them that you've already done the research and you have her email address. Is that correct? She says it is. Thank you. Very good for the information. So that's a typical initial connection or a discovery call example. In this example, I'm going to talk about this is making a call maybe to this practice or another practice where I don't have the person's name. In my prospect research, I wasn't able to gather the information, don't know the practice manager's name. So I just call in and I say, hey, this is who I am, this is who I work for, this is what I'm trying to find out. And I ask the person, do you handle that? So we're just going to ask the person that answers the phone if they're responsible for it. In this particular case, they say, no, our office manager, Sarah, takes care of that. So now what I've done is by doing that is I at least have the first name of the practice manager. So now that's helped me with my prospect research. It moves on until I get to talk to Sarah, and I ask the same question. Do you outsource it? Are you pleased with it? And you can see right there below, right there in that second column, her response is, we do use a cleaning company. And it's interesting that you've called because we were just talking about this. And this happens sometimes. We're not really, she goes on to say, we're really not that pleased with our current vendor. And this response is, well, I'm sorry to hear that. That can be really frustrating when you have a whole lot of other things that you're responsible for. So I'm kind of in that little phrase, I'm trying to say, hey, I understand how busy it is to be a medical practice manager, and it's got to be frustrating when people are complaining about the cleanliness of the building. And then I ask, have you been with your vendor for how long have you been working with them? And she responds with, yeah, it's been about 4 years. But the last several months, they've had a lot of turnover and their work's been inconsistent. So I'm ready to make a comment like this. Unfortunately, turnover is a challenge for all of us in this business. And then I'll say, we've implemented some processes to help us find good candidates who are going to stay with us a little bit. And then we also have local manager, but kind of boots on the ground that help us stay connected to our team members so that hopefully they'll stay with us longer and we can coach them and encourage them. And then I say this. We serve a number of practices, like I mentioned, we serve a number of practices like yours. Would it make sense for me to come out and, you know, have a look at your facility and give you and gather some information to present a proposal to you? Notice in this her response here. Her response is this, and we get this a number of times. I don't think I'm quite ready for that. I want to talk with our current vendor and company and see if we can kind of get this straightened out. And so what she's sharing with me is they are in my system, in my prospect status system. They're in SQL, so I'm going to record that in my CRM. I'm going to change their status from pre-qualified to SQL, and I respond back with, that makes perfect sense. And that's the truth. If this were our customer, we would want that person to be trying to figure it out with us before they dropped us. But anyway, so I say that makes perfect sense. If it's okay, I'll call you back in a couple of months to see how things are going. Again, I ask her about her email address and I move on. I'm going to take the same example, but let's go all the way over here to when I say, would it make sense for me to come by, take a quick look around and give you a proposal? And she responds with, sure. I mean, I have some time tomorrow if that works for you. Typically, they don't give that information. You have to ask like, hey, would tomorrow be okay? In this case, I'm going to set their prospect status to opportunity because they're ready to go. They're saying to us, yes, come out because I'd like to see your proposal. And then I move through and I'll tell her here that I'll send her a meeting invite so that she'll have that and that she'll have my email address. So um, let's go back to the initial contact cadence. So what I'm going to do in this particular case, if I were calling that medical practice, is I would make calls, leave emails, send voicemails for a month. If I couldn't get a hold of somebody again, move on to somebody else. And I do this until I get that information that I want to gather. Okay, so that's initial connection. Once you've made initial connection, so let's say that we've go back to the example we just talked about. Here's a medical practice with 14 providers, so that's a big practice. It's certainly a segment that we want to work in. So what do I, now that I have this information about the doctor's family in that first one, the doctor's family does the work, and they're probably not going to change. Do I just leave them hanging out there and I don't call them? That wouldn't be very smart. So what we're going to do is we're going to nurture them. There's two primary purposes of nurturing, and one, the first one is really to remain top of mind. So we want to keep our name out there, so that they don't forget us, so that if something ever were to happen, let's say that doctor leaves the practice and then people in the office say, gosh, I'm now that they're gone, let's get another cleaning company because their family didn't do a very good job. And so we want that practice manager to think, oh, that France Building Services company, they reached out to me, and so we want them to stay top of mind. And then also we want to build trust through serving and not selling. And so what I'm going to talk about here is throughout this process, we're not going to bang the drum about France Building Services in our case. What we're going to do is we're going to bang the drum or give them information that's going to help them throughout this process so that they'll think of us as someone who didn't just call them and bug them about they just wanted my business. What we want to do is we want to say, hey, France Building Services is a company that just consistently stayed in contact with me and didn't bug me to death. And along the way, kind of gave me some good information. That's nurturing. So in order to do that, we need to create some content. Now, you don't have to be a great writer. In fact, you don't have to be a good writer at all. You can use ChatGPT to kind of help you collect your thoughts and get some information in place, and post it on your website and use it other places. But here's three kinds of content that you could do, and these are all very easy to do. It takes a little time, and you have to set aside that time, like I mentioned previously. The first is blog post coupled with a kind of a newsletter. And when I say newsletter, I'm not talking about one that folds up and you mail them. I'm talking about doing an electronic newsletter that you can use your CRM to do that. And what you're going to do, what I would suggest is to create blog posts on topics about things that are important to the buyer, and you can also include your information about your company, but nothing promoting your services. So what that might look like is, um, you might write about a blog post about, we wrote one several months ago. It was, where did all the custodians go? And what we talked about was is what happened after COVID is a lot of people left the workforce. A lot of that created a void. It got filled up with people that we were hiring. They could go to work someplace else and make more money and not work as hard as they were as a custodian or a janitor. And so we did a little blog post about that and send that to them. We can also, in that newsletter, we might highlight something that our company's done in terms of community service, or we might talk about, hey, here's somebody that's worked for us for 25 years, and do a little highlight of them. We might highlight a company that we're working with. Just a variety of things just to keep our name in front of them. The next one is a guide, and I'll tell you an example of this that we use a lot, and I say a lot. We've used it several times. It's been very successful. Is we created a mocked up, or I would say mocked up, a template of a janitorial services RFP. And so what happens sometimes is I'll talk to somebody and they'll say, we're not really that happy with our current vendor, but I'm slammed here and I don't even have time to get together just an RFP to send out to vendors. What I would say is well, hey, we developed a template. We see a lot of RFPs, and so we created a template, and I would love to send that to you, and you can use it if you want, and that might save you some time. And I can tell you, that's been very successful for us. I'm not saying it's always landed us business, but I've had no one, everyone that I've sent it to said, man, I really appreciate that. It was very helpful to me. And so that would be a guide, and also a webinar. And you think, gosh, what am I'm going to do a webinar? You can do a webinar. You can do something like what I'm doing right now. You can just record, but pick something like, for instance, what to know about I-9 compliance. We did a webinar at Elite BSC about this, but everybody is dealing with this right now. and you could gather some information, or you could get an HR, someone that you know in the HR world, to get on a little screen recording like this, send this off to your customer. Again, what you're trying to say is I, it, I want to serve you. That's my, even if I'm cleaning your building, I'm serving you. But even through the sales process, I want to serve you. And if the result of this is that we end up doing business, that's great. But I'm going to keep serving you, and I don't know, that makes work a little bit more enjoyable when we know even in the sales process that we're serving. So let's talk about the nurturing cadence. So how often do you do this? And this is the cadence that we've used at France for a number of years. And what that looks like is every other month, I'm going to drop some content on them. Uh, those, especially who are in the MQL status, those folks who, they say they're not going to do anything. And so every other month, I'm sending them a link to a blog post or a link to our newsletter. And then about every 4 or 6 months, I'm reaching out with a telephone call and saying, "Hey, Susan, I reached out to you. It's been 6 months ago since we talked. You said at that time that one of your doctor's family members was had a company in cleaning your building. I'm assuming that's still going well for you." And she if so, she's probably going to go, "Yeah, that's still going well. That's awesome. I hope you've seen some of the stuff that I've sent. I'll call you back in a few months. Have a great you can have a Merry Christmas, or hope you have a happy holiday," and then move on. And so that's what nurturing looks like. So it's content and telephone calls. One of the things that I hear, and one of the things people use, they'll say, "Hey, and it's calling to check back in." I would encourage you to get rid of that language, or "Hey, just circling back." That's that's salesy language. The key is I'm calling you and I'm saying, "Hey, last time we spoke, this was your situation." And if that situation was good, you can say, "I hope things are still going well for you." Um, so let me tell you, let me go back, and I'm going to end with this. This is an example of this. Remember, I mentioned that focus, systematic, and consistent. Focus, systematic, and consistent. That's an important part of doing outbound work. So this is a real life example. I got all of this information out of our CRM. And so you can look, my dates are wrong to the very top. It's 2016, not 2006. But we made an outbound telephone call on January the 19th of 2016. And then we made a second one on February the 3rd of 2016. We made telephone calls, we left voicemails, and we sent emails. On the 3rd of February of 2016, I get this email from the person I'm reaching out to. And this person says, "Jeff, sorry, but we're very secure," which is interesting language, "but we're very secure with our services. They are practically family and grew up in the textile business with us. Now, if there's any way to tell you we're not changing," he just said it. But he says, "We do have Francis' name in our preferred contractors listing. If we decide to do anything, I'll reach out to you. Thanks for calling. But a site visit's not necessary." I think at that time I was saying, "Hey, I'd love to come out and tour your facility." And then he signs off, "Joe Morgan, Director of Building and Grounds." So if you're a baseball fan, you'll kind of snicker at that. Joe Morgan, great baseball player. Anyway, it wasn't him. And then my response back to him was, "Hey Joe, thanks for the response. I'll reach out occasionally with some information that might be helpful. Again, thank you for your response." And then in March, we emailed them a content piece. April, which would have been when we do a call typically, we didn't call them because we had just talked to them in February. In May, we sent them a content piece. In August, we called them. September email, November email, December voice call and left voicemail. So that was what we did in 2016. In 2017, we repeated that cadence. In 2018, we're ready to repeat the cadence again. And in February, we send an email, and Joe Morgan's email bounces back to us. And so we said, what's going on there? And so we reached out and reached out to the operator and said, "Hi, this is Jeff Carmen with France Building Services. Can I speak to Joe Morgan?" And the lady goes, "Oh, I'm sorry, Joe retired. He doesn't work here anymore." And I said, "Oh, can you give me the person's name who replaced Joe?" And she says, "Certainly, we sure can." So she forwards me I leave a voicemail. The fellow who and then we start reaching out to him. He, he in May, he reached back out to us and said, "Hey, yeah, I'd love for you guys to come out and look through the building, um, and then give us a proposal." When we did the facility tour with him, he confirmed that that company had been with them for a long time. They were certainly like family. The owner of this company, the customer, uh, the janitorial company, they were fraternity brothers, and so they had a great relationship. But this guy said nobody had ever really been that happy with the janitorial company, but they weren't going to say anything to the president of the company. And so this gave us an opportunity to get in there, and on in December we ended up getting that contract, and here we are in 2025, and we're still doing business with them. And so I show you this to say, if we had not had a process and we had not stayed on this, we hadn't been consistent, we probably would not have picked up on the fact, or we wouldn't have known that Joe left the company and there was a new contact. And this guy, I mean, we just again just stay consistent. The new guy said that he had seen all the stuff that Joe had left with our name on it, and so it was proof that at least Joe, the guy that was there before, was keeping our information and was truthful when he said that we were in a file that he had about preferred contractors. So that's all that I have, and I hope this little series has been helpful. As always, we'd love to have you as a part of Elite BSC, and I'm glad to talk with you about that. But even if you say, "Hey, I have no interest in Elite BSC, but I would like to have a conversation with you. I'm interested in learning how you guys do this, or some tips and techniques to make this outbound process the best it can be." I'm always glad to help. No charge on that at all. It's just give me a call or shoot me an email. I'd love to have a telephone conversation with you, and we can talk through that. But again, I hope this was helpful, and I hope you have a great day. Take care. Bye bye.